I never thought I'd notice her like this, standing in the doorway, her hand frozen on the frame as if the world had slowed down around her. My friend's sister. Always just that. And yet, tonight, something had shifted. She laughed quietly at something my friend said, a soft, knowing sound that didn't reach her eyes. Her eyes, dark and reflective, caught mine across the room for a moment, and my chest tightened. I looked away too quickly, pretending to check my phone, even though I had nothing to check. She was in her mid-40s, poised, every movement careful, like she had lived 1,000 stories and carried them all with her. I was 24, fumbling with words, fumbling with this unexpected weight in my chest every time she was near. I had always admired her from afar, her warmth, the way she made everyone laugh, the subtle confidence she wore like a second skin. But admiration had never felt like this before, never made my hands tremble slightly when she looked at me. The room was quiet now, the low hum of the refrigerator and the soft murmur of voices from the living room mixing with the faint clink of glasses. She leaned back against the counter, one hand brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. I couldn't help but notice the faint scent of her perfume, something floral, soft, dangerous even in its subtlety. It hit me in a way I wasn't prepared for. "Hey," she said suddenly, her voice softer than before, almost hesitant, and I froze. That simple word carried something heavier, like she was weighing it before letting it slip. "Hey," I replied, too quickly, my voice cracking slightly. I cursed myself inwardly, praying she hadn't noticed. She smiled, a small, careful smile, the kind that didn't quite reach her eyes. And then, she laughed again, quieter this time, almost shyly. Something in her posture shifted, a vulnerability I hadn't expected. She wasn't just my friend's sister tonight. She was herself. And somehow, I felt like I could be myself too, if only for a moment. We moved closer without realizing it, drawn by some quiet gravity, the kind that doesn't announce itself with fireworks or sudden confessions. It was in the way her fingers lingered just a second too long on the edge of the counter, the way my gaze kept returning to the curve of her jaw, the faint blush that warmed her cheeks when our eyes met. I wanted to speak. I wanted to tell her something, anything, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I just watched, letting the silence stretch between us, thick with unspoken understanding. Then, without warning, she leaned in slightly, just enough that her shoulder brushed mine. I felt a shiver run down my spine, a dangerous thrill that made the air seem heavier. I could see her hesitation, the tiny pause, the flicker of conflict in her eyes. She wanted to retreat, to hold the boundary she had always maintained, but part of her didn't. Before I could think, before I could even breathe, she whispered, "I've been meaning to tell you something." And at that exact moment, the doorbell rang. She froze. My heart slammed against my ribs. Something in her eyes changed. Was it fear? Excitement? Something else entirely? I wanted to ask, to reach out, to pull her closer, but the moment shattered as the sound echoed through the apartment. Her lips parted slightly, and I realized she had left me hanging on whatever truth she was about to share. And in that instant, everything felt impossibly fragile, dangerously real, and completely ours. If only we could get past the next moment. I knew one thing for sure. Nothing would ever be the same after tonight. The doorbell had rung, but neither of us moved. She glanced toward the hall, then back at me, and I noticed the faint tremor in her fingers, like she wasn't sure she wanted to answer it. Neither was I. Somehow, the world outside didn't matter. Only the space between us did. She had always been different. Not just older, not just my friend's sister, but someone who carried a quiet strength that hid scars I could only guess at. I'd caught glimpses before, loneliness behind her laughter, a sigh too soft to notice if you weren't paying attention. But tonight it felt amplified, like she was letting a piece of herself slip through. I thought about her past, the whispers I'd heard in passing. Marriages that didn't last, heartbreak that had shaped her into this poised, careful version of herself. I knew she had loved, truly, and lost. That knowledge made me ache for her in ways I couldn't name. I felt unworthy, too young, too inexperienced. Yet every time she looked at me, those walls seemed just a little thinner. And then there was me, 24, still figuring out what life wanted from me, still fumbling with my own heartbreaks. I'd loved and been left, simple as that. I carried my own shame. For being too naive, too impulsive, too reckless with hearts not my own. And yet, standing here with her, I felt steady, almost brave, like maybe I could be trusted. There was risk in everything. Age wasn't just a number tonight. It was a barrier, a reminder that I wasn't supposed to be feeling this. And yet, her presence, her subtle glances, the soft exhale she let out when she thought no one was watching, it all called to something in me that refused caution. The attraction, the tension, it wasn't safe. And maybe that made it irresistible. I tried to suppress it, tried to remind myself she was my friend's sister, someone I should respect the invisible boundaries around. But every time she leaned just slightly closer, or our hands brushed against the countertop while reaching for the same glass, my resolve cracked. I noticed her more. The faint curve of her neck, the warmth of her shoulder when she shifted her weight, the way her eyes caught the dim light and made them look softer than I'd ever seen. She caught my stare, and for a long moment, we didn't look away. The silence wasn't empty. It was full of unspoken confessions and questions neither of us dared voice. Then, slowly, she reached for the edge of my sleeve, brushing it lightly with her fingertips. It was nothing and everything. A memory flared in my mind. Last summer, laughing in the sun at a small park, her hair tangled by the wind, her eyes laughing, the easy way she'd always made me feel like I mattered. That memory hovered between us now, tangible, making the air thick with something we both wanted to name but couldn't. I wanted to ask her about it, about everything, her past, her fears, what she was really thinking, but the words caught in my throat. So instead, I let my hand hover near hers, close enough that the faintest spark of contact seemed inevitable. And in that delicate, electric pause, I realized this wasn't just a fleeting moment. Whatever she was about to tell me, whatever the doorbell might interrupt, it was a beginning. I was still standing there, frozen, when the doorbell rang again. This time, she didn't hesitate. She exhaled sharply and moved toward the door, her hand brushing the small of my back. The contact was brief, almost accidental, but it set my nerves on fire. She opened the door to reveal my friend, grinning like nothing had happened. "Hey, you too," he said, unaware, oblivious to the tension thickening the room. "Mind if I join you?" My stomach sank. My friend had always been easygoing, talkative, the kind of person who could fill any silence. I knew that if he stayed too long, the fragile bubble we'd been floating in would burst. She gave him a polite smile, a tilt of the head that was almost apologetic. "Sure," she said softly, and I caught a flicker of something in her eyes. Hesitation? Worry. That made my pulse spike. We sat, the three of us, and I could barely focus on the conversation. Every time she laughed at something he said, I felt a sharp tug in my chest. It wasn't jealousy exactly. It was something deeper, something I hadn't learned to name yet. My hands itched to reach for hers, to brush a stray hair from her cheek, but I stayed still. I had to. Minutes passed like hours. I noticed the way she kept glancing at me when she thought my friend wasn't looking, the subtle tilt of her head as if weighing whether to close the distance between us. I caught myself leaning just a little closer, drawn in by a gravity I couldn't resist. Then, the near kiss happened. We both reached for the same glass at the counter. Our fingers brushed. Neither of us pulled back immediately. Her eyes met mine, wide, slightly startled, and then she hesitated. My heart was hammering, my breath caught somewhere between my chest and my throat. The world narrowed to that tiny contact. I wanted to say something, anything, to break the tension, but no words came. "Sorry," she whispered, withdrawing her hand almost reluctantly. But her gaze lingered, a quiet question, a silent dare. I swallowed hard. I wanted to pull her closer, to bridge that small space between us, but logic and guilt wrapped around me like chains. My friend was here. This was dangerous. Taboo. Irresistible, but dangerous. As if sensing the tension, my friend suddenly turned, laughing at some private joke he remembered from earlier in the week. I saw the shift in her shoulders, the brief exhale of relief, and I wanted to scream inside. "Don't leave. Stay here, just for a moment." Then, the text came. My phone vibrated. I glanced down, hoping it was something innocuous, but my heart sank. "My roommate. You left your door unlocked. Someone was hanging around outside." I felt my stomach twist. Outside? Who? My thoughts immediately jumped to her, though logically, it couldn't be her. She was inside. But the worry, the fear, the potential exposure, it all knotted tight around my chest. She noticed the change in my expression. "What's wrong?" she asked, stepping closer, her hand brushing my arm just slightly. That light touch ignited something deep inside me, something both thrilling and terrifying. "Nothing," I muttered, but I wasn't lying entirely. Nothing I could explain without sounding insane. Nothing that wouldn't immediately put every boundary we'd been tiptoeing along in danger. Her gaze softened, almost pitying, almost knowing. She leaned slightly closer, and I realized she was reading my mind, seeing the swirl of guilt, fear, and desire I couldn't hide. My pulse surged. I wanted her so badly, and yet I knew pulling her into that moment was a risk neither of us could fully control. We shouldn't," she said, voice barely audible, trembling slightly. She turned her head, biting her lip, and I could see the conflict writ large across her features. Every line, every hesitation, told a story of restraint battling with longing. And yet, despite her words, she stayed close. So close that I could feel the warmth radiating from her shoulder, the faint scent of her perfume mixing with the tension in the air. I wanted to close the distance entirely, to press my lips to hers, to let this unsaid confession escape in a kiss. But I didn't. Instead, we stood there, suspended, caught in a moment that was both torture and revelation. Neither of us moved. Our breaths synchronized without intent. Her hand hovered near mine again, and this time I let mine brush hers, a fraction longer than necessary. Sparks, small but undeniable, shot through me. Then my friend laughed again, breaking the spell, but it didn't matter. Nothing outside this room mattered. All that existed was the invisible thread pulling us together, teasing us with the dangerous promise of something forbidden, something inevitable. And I knew, with terrifying clarity, that one day soon, neither of us would be able to resist that pull. I couldn't breathe. Every time she laughed, every time she shifted closer to me, it was like my chest was being squeezed by an invisible hand. And now she was talking to someone else. Not my friend, another man I barely recognized, someone from her work. My stomach twisted in a way I hadn't expected. I hated myself for it, for feeling this way. Jealousy shouldn't exist between us, not yet. We weren't even. Nothing was official, nothing was real. But there it was, sharp and undeniable, gnawing at me. I wanted to look away, to act casual, but I couldn't. I couldn't let her see me like this, exposed. She smiled at him. A little too warmly, a little too easily. My fists clenched at my sides, and I realized I was trembling. Not from anger, not fully, but from the fear of losing her even before I'd truly had her. She caught my glance. And that look, oh God, that look made me feel like she knew. She knew exactly what I was feeling. My pulse quickened. Every rational thought evaporated. My mind screamed at me to step back, to calm down, to let it go. But my body didn't listen. I took a step closer. A small, almost imperceptible step. She noticed immediately, and the warmth in her eyes shifted, hesitation flaring into tension. Her hand brushed the edge of the counter, then stayed there, trembling just slightly. I could see her inner conflict mirrored in that tiny movement. "Are you okay?" she asked softly, her voice quivering. Not with fear, I don't think, but with the same dangerous electricity I was feeling. I can't. I started, then stopped. The words fell apart in my throat. I wanted to tell her everything. About the jealousy, the longing, the way my chest ached when someone else smiled at her. But I couldn't. Not here. Not now. Her lips parted slightly, as if she wanted to say something too. I wanted her to. I wanted her confession, her truth, her permission to feel whatever I was feeling. But the moment hung there, fragile and dangerous. One wrong move, one whispered word, and it could all shatter. I reached for her hand again, slowly, testing, almost begging. She didn't pull away, not immediately. But the tension radiating from her was tangible, a magnetic push and pull that left me breathless. I could feel her hesitation, her awareness of the line we were inching toward, and it made every nerve in my body hum with danger. And then she said it. "I can't." "Not anymore," she whispered, just above a breath, and my heart slammed against my ribs. I froze. That simple sentence carried everything. The desire, the fear, the impossibility of what we were doing. My head spun with what-ifs, with the weight of every rule we were breaking, every boundary we were testing. I wanted to throw caution to the wind, to close the distance between us, to finally. The sound of her phone buzzing on the counter pulled both of us out of the moment. She glanced at it, her hand hovering over the screen, and I saw that flicker of hesitation again. Fear? Urgency? I couldn't tell. But I knew this. Whatever we were about to do, whatever we were about to admit, the world outside that room was waiting, threatening to drag us back into reality. And yet, I couldn't move away. Not yet. I thought I understood the danger, the stakes, the unspoken rules we were dancing around. I thought we were safe, just two people teetering on the edge, testing the invisible line between restraint and desire. But then it all changed. Her phone buzzed again, insistently. She glanced at it, then froze. Her eyes widened, and I felt it before she spoke. The kind of panic that tightens your chest and makes the air too thick to breathe. It's him, she whispered, almost to herself. Her voice was sharp now, tense, trembling in a way I hadn't heard before. My ex. He knows I'm here. I blinked. My stomach dropped. My mind raced, trying to process what that meant. He knew she was here. He might see us, hear us. She was shaking, a subtle tremor running through her fingers as they gripped the edge of the counter. I wanted to reach out, but I hesitated. I didn't want to make things worse. I didn't think he would. She began, then stopped, biting her lip, eyes darting toward the door as if expecting it to burst open any second. The warmth I'd felt from her before was replaced by something fragile, a trembling vulnerability that made my chest ache. My own heart pounded with a mix of fear and something else. Desire? Protectiveness? I wasn't sure anymore. All I knew was I couldn't let her face this alone. I've got you, I said softly, stepping closer, letting my hand hover near hers. She flinched slightly, but didn't pull away completely. That small refusal to retreat, it felt like a lifeline. Then the worst happened. My friend, completely oblivious to our delicate tension, laughed from the living room. The sound carried differently now, like a drumbeat echoing toward disaster. She stiffened beside me, and I felt the weight of every rule, every taboo, pressing down. I could tell she was scared, not of me, not of us, but of being caught, of being exposed. Her eyes met mine, and in them I saw the truth. This attraction wasn't just dangerous, it was impossible. And yet, neither of us could stop. The tension between us was like static electricity, threatening to spark at any moment. I need to be honest, she whispered, almost a plea. I shouldn't feel this. I shouldn't want this. But I do. My pulse spiked. That confession, soft as it was, carried more weight than any words I'd ever heard. It wasn't a question. It was a declaration, fragile and trembling, yet fearless. I swallowed hard. I want this too. I admitted, my voice low, rough. Even if it's wrong. Even if it's risky. Even if the world says we can't. Her hand finally found mine. Our fingers brushing and then interlocking. A small but electric rebellion against everything trying to keep us apart. And just as the tension peaked, the doorknob rattled. We froze. Heartbeats echoing. Breath caught. The impossible had found its way into the room. Someone, maybe him, maybe someone else, was standing outside, threatening to unravel everything. I felt her squeeze my hand, tight, urgent. Our eyes met, and I knew, in that brief, suspended moment, that nothing would ever be the same. The doorknob rattled again, louder this time, and my heart felt like it had lodged somewhere between my throat and my chest. I could hear her breathing, fast, shallow, the way it always got when she was nervous, or excited, or maybe both. She turned to me, her eyes dark and wide, and for the first time, I saw all the contradictions in her at once. Fear, desire, hesitation, longing. She wanted to run. She wanted to stay. She wanted me to understand without words. And I did. I understood completely. I can't, she whispered, her voice breaking. I shouldn't. I cut her off gently, placing my hands on her shoulders. No, don't. Not tonight. My words sounded too sure, too commanding even to me. But the truth was simple. I couldn't let fear win. Not now, not with her. Her lips trembled as she met my gaze. The air between us was thick, electric, impossible to ignore. Every hesitation, every rule we'd tried to follow, every whispered caution dissolved in that single, suspended moment. I want this, I said softly, almost a plea. I want you. Not the idea of you. Not the safe version. Just you. Her hands found mine, gripping tightly. I want you too, she admitted, voice barely above a whisper, shaking with the force of something we'd both denied for too long. It was messy, it was wrong in every conceivable way, and yet it felt like breathing after holding it in for years. I leaned in, slowly, as if the air itself had grown heavy with anticipation. She met me halfway, closing the distance, but not completely. That pause, the tiny hesitation, was everything. A lifetime of restraint, fear, longing, and the unspoken acknowledgement that what we were doing was dangerous and forbidden, yet irresistible. Then the moment shattered, not completely, but enough to make my heart slam. Her phone lit up again. Another message, another intrusion from the outside world, a reminder that reality was waiting, patient and relentless. She exhaled, a mix of frustration and relief, and brushed her forehead against mine. We can't. We have to. I know. I whispered, though every fiber of me wanted to erase that have to and throw caution to the wind. We stood like that for what felt like eternity, holding hands, foreheads touching, breathing in the same air, hearts beating in sync. No words were needed. No promises. Just understanding. A fragile, dangerous, beautiful understanding that whatever came next, we had crossed a line together, and nothing could undo that. She finally stepped back slightly, still holding my hand, eyes searching mine. There was fear there, and desire, and a quiet defiance that made my chest ache. She started, then stopped, uncertain if she wanted to finish. I shook my head slightly, pressing my thumb against hers. Not yet. Just this. And for a moment, everything paused. The world outside the apartment, the rules, the risks, the judgments, faded. All that existed was us, raw and exposed, standing on the edge of something both beautiful and terrifying. We didn't know what would happen next. Maybe fear would win. Maybe the world would intrude. Maybe we'd run. But in that suspended heartbeat, we knew one thing. We saw each other, truly, completely, and that was enough for now. The apartment was quiet now, but it wasn't the same quiet as before. It was heavy with everything we hadn't said, everything we had almost, but didn't do. I could feel her presence beside me, warm, steady, yet trembling with the weight of the moment we'd just shared. She looked at me, really looked, and I saw it. The mixture of fear and hope, guilt and desire, hesitation and courage. She had crossed her own lines tonight, and so had I. But unlike before, we weren't alone in that. We had each other. I never thought, she started, voice soft, almost hesitant. I never thought I'd feel like this again. Not after everything. I shook my head, smiling gently. Neither did I admitted. I thought it was impossible. But here we are. Somehow, we made it to this moment. Her hand found mine again, fingers intertwining easily this time, without hesitation. The tremor was still there, but it was subtle now, a quiet reminder of what we had overcome. We didn't speak for a long while, letting the silence hold us instead of pushing it away. Words would come later. Words were unnecessary in the way our hearts were communicating. I thought about all the risks, the barriers, the things that could have kept us apart. Age, assumptions, guilt, fear. And yet, they hadn't. Somehow, in the messy, imperfect way life always works, we had found each other. Not perfectly, not safely, but completely, vulnerably, humanly. She laughed softly, a sound that wasn't forced this time. We're ridiculous, she said, shaking her head, eyes glinting with mischief and relief. Yeah, I said, laughing quietly too. Ridiculous, but right? Her gaze softened, and for the first time in hours, I felt the tension ease. The electricity between us didn't disappear. It settled into something warmer, something promising, something we could nurture instead of fearing. We stood there, hands still clasped, foreheads almost touching, and I realized that while the future was uncertain, I didn't care. I didn't care about what anyone thought or what could go wrong. What mattered was this. We had crossed the line together, and we were still standing, still breathing, still wanting more. She squeezed my hand gently, a silent promise, and I returned it with everything I had. Not words, not plans, just this moment. Intense, fleeting, beautiful. And as the sun dipped lower outside the window, painting the room in warm gold, I knew we were beginning something that didn't have a map or a guide. But that was the point. That was life. Messy, human, and ours. C14.